Continuing You Can Change the World, The Christopher Approach by James Keller. We're in Chapter 9, Social Service, Man's Welfare, Here as well as Hereafter. Social casework is concerned with such fields as child welfare, family welfare, medical social service, probation, parole, and protective care, psychiatric social work, school visiting, school attendance, social investigation, those who have made a study of prevailing theories and practices in this field state that social casework is primarily a matter of personal analysis, utilizing an approach based on ideas and techniques which, on the whole, are materialistic and pagan. Don't get how that's the case, but social workers learn a great deal of the required knowledge of sociology, economics, government, psychology, and other social studies from many godless-minded professors, and their viewpoint is shaped accordingly. These professors doubt or deny the existence of a supreme being, the essential worth of the individual human soul, and the freedom of the will. Well, sometimes those atheist and practical atheists are the most for freedom around. And much of the teaching of these men logically leads to the acceptance of the totalitarian state, even though they themselves may not carry their theorizing to its final conclusion. For many of them, the only source of human rights is society itself. What society gives, it can take away, and since the organ through which society enforces its customs is, in their view, the state, then the state can take away any and every right we now enjoy. To paraphrase, well, whether or not you believe that it's the source of rights or not, this, individuals and groups can certainly have effects like that, can't they? To paraphrase the words of one of the founders of American sociology, custom is king, and custom finds its way into law. If, for instance, society adopted the custom of putting aged people to death, then, in the opinion of these men, this custom would be perfectly acceptable. All right and wrong, in their view, is relative to the society in which people live. Some societies made the older you are a criteria for how severe the punishment could be. Because they figured, we're going to have to take care of the person, so let's, The danger to our Christian civilization inherent in such a philosophy is becoming more and more apparent to sound-thinking Americans the country over, as one distinguished professional man, Dr. F.L. Feyerabend, writing in the Journal of the American Medical Association, pointed out so clearly. Physicians must reject the teachings of the materialist, sociologist, and return to the teachings of the moral law. They must reject completely the doctrine of the materialist, which teaches that religion and morality is the opium of the people. It's also the amphetamine of the masses, too. And that man is motivated entirely by instinct. Doctors must avoid this materialistic doctrine, or by their acts, they will be promoting regimentation. Like what we've seen with psychiatry, that there's, just like in the 50s, they literally said in the conference, was it 54 or something like that, that their goal was to go after religious and family values and to set things up so that everybody has a condition that you can medicate. Like they've come up with the medication alternative to the issues that people are covering up when they use various street drugs. I think pretty much everything's covered now, right? Neglect of social responsibility. It invites the state to take over with coercion and regimentation. Emphasizing the seriousness of Dr. Feyerabend's warning, it may surprise to learn that a great number of states have sterilization laws. At present, there are 31 sterilization statutes, with 16 of them obligatory. This is a book from the 40s, by the way. That is, they do not require the consent of patients, parents, or guardians. Social workers cannot avoid involvement in problems created by these laws. When, for example, they place a client in an institution for the feeble-minded, when there is a state law or an institutional policy providing for sterilization of patients before discharge. Now, nowadays, one of the ways to get around that is, well, possible medication side effects. So you know that some of the individuals who get the medication are not going to be able to have children, either because they're sterile or because of some condition that stands in the way. Some people are just, well, we make money by prescribing drugs. So, but, there is some intention in that one's found. But I'm not saying it's every group or something, but social workers often handle cases in which the doctor has advised therapeutic abortion, sterilization, or artificial birth control. Now, birth control I've seen advocated a lot more. And it's not just a birth control thing, too. Highly complex divorce cases requiring sound moral judgment, proper placing of children, and so on, also comes within the scope of social casework, since the social worker comes into close person-to-person contact with clients. His or her ideas on these subjects will inevitably pass over to their minds, much as what is in a teacher's head is transmitted to the students in the classroom. This is especially true when it is recognized that the client frequently relies on the caseworker for advice and a sympathetic, favorable handling of his or her problems. When the caseworker's ideas are warped or colored with a godless philosophy, then the client receives distorted impressions which he or she frequently is in no position to judge as to their inaccuracies. Often such a person has no defense against a caseworker's continual emphasis that man is but a creature of passion, has no free will, and is dominated by unconscious impulses of a lustful nature, and so on. From this pagan concept, well, I don't know. I think if anything, certain animism and Dionism sorts of features would be even more common in the so-called pagan religions, whether they're monotheist or polytheist that aren't Christian. That was the definition at the time this book was written. Pagan had nothing to do with some... but pagan and heathen from the Greco-Roman origins doesn't have anything to do with religious type. Anyways, from this, it is but a step to the acceptance of the notion that man is an economic animal, and that whatever rights he has come from the state. This acceptance is further hastened when it is remembered that the people with whom the social worker comes in contact are often emotionally unsettled because they are improperly housed, inadequately fed or clothed. Don't prescribe things for chemical imbalances until you figure out what the chemical imbalances are. You can do blood work, you can test the urine, the hair, without proper medical care and advice, and lacking any real economic security. 4. The Christopher entering this field, convinced as he is of his own essential dignity and of the intrinsic worth of those whom his profession serves, his is the vocation of putting an individual back on his or her own feet and giving that person the opportunity of better working out his or her eternal destiny. Now, I saw, 12 years ago, the turning of my country from 80% middle class to 80% lower class. And, think of why and that was done intentionally, of course, through policy. One social worker, a woman, by the way, with a Christopher purpose and possessed of great gifts of mind and heart, started at the bottom in the field, and because of her ability, devotion, and hard work over long periods of years, has risen to a high-level position in federal government. There, she has a direct, almost daily effect upon the lives and security of nearly every one of our people, finding that the trend of thought in this particular social service agency was toward the forgetfulness of sound Christian values. The Christopher, almost single-handed, has changed the policies and thinking of the agency personnel by emphasizing the sacredness of the home and family, justice in administration, and genuine charity for the poor and needy. She does this in the Spirit of Christ. Amen, I say to you, as long as you did it to one of these, my least brethren, you did it to me. Matthew 25:40. Education and personality requirements for the workers in the social service field. Generally speaking, to be accepted for social service work, a man or woman must have a master's degree from a recognized school of social service. With current shortages in social service personnel, however, some persons with only 1 year's work in such a school are being employed at present, but in the majority of cases there will be no promotions available without a master's degree. Undergraduate preparation should emphasize such things as biology, psychology, sociology, and economics. Then, too, such subjects as political science, history, and English should not be neglected. A well-balanced rather than specialized undergraduate preparation is considered by most leading authorities to be the best means of entering a field which employs social workers in bad times as well as good. As for personality requirements, the prospective social service worker must like people and want to work with and for them, must possess intelligence, courage, and optimism, the latter tempered by a firm grasp of reality. Where social workers are most needed, the particular fields of social service most in need of trained, sound-thinking men and women are those of public welfare, parole, state, federal, municipal, probation, adult and juvenile, also state, federal, municipal, Board of Education attendance officers. These are not merely truant officers, but investigators of home conditions as well, child guidance, recreation, Boy and Girl Scouts, Girl Guides, psychiatric social work. Men are especially needed to fill responsible positions in such branches of social work as parole, probation, social service instruction, i.e. professors competent to teach courses in this subject with particular stress on adult and juvenile delinquency, penology and prison administration, criminology as scholars in the field of the scientific study of crime, its causes, conditions, symptoms, and possible cures. Men in this field must have a practical background in parole or probation work. One of the things that we find the growing atheism, more like practical atheism, but then is that crime has gone up because people feel like, well, I can probably get away with it, probably, and a lot of that stuff is, or that maybe they could, regardless of what the probability is, because they're not looking at consequences hereafter. And secondarily, we find that people who think that, these non-pagans, as they're called, that believe that a person, can vicariously rely rather than having to do their best, like in most paths, then you have an increase of crime. But not as much as the people that don't have a spiritual path. The cause of most social ills. All that we have so far written about the social service field has dealt with effects rather than causes. The root of most of our social ills today, economic insecurity, inadequate housing, insufficient wages for the present high cost of living, is not so much material as spiritual. The eager pursuit of worldly goods, the desire for possessions, the ambition for more power, the striving for outward success. A sociologist who works for social reform, while neglecting this widespread disease of the soul, is only treating the symptoms. He is not getting at their causes and may even be aggravating the malady. If people today lack many things they need, this is not basically to be charged to any system, but to the adverse in the souls of so many others, to the fact that too many think in terms of the good of the few rather than of the all. well, they can be combined, right? Whatever they call themselves, such people are materialist in their thinking, and it is this very greed for material things which lies in the root of current social ills. There is no doubt that social reform is needed, but even more, and as an indispensable foundation, there is a need for a return to fundamental principles. Strangely enough, the one thing so many who earnestly desire to help humanity forget is man himself. They forget he is something more than an animal, to be fed, housed, clothed, and amused. They forget he is a person with spiritual needs, which far surpass in importance any of his material wants, important as those things are. The very concept of social service for men, regardless of race, color, or creed, owes its origin to Christ. I don't think that any of the morals in the Bible you can really say didn't happen until the Bible. The anointed consciousness, sure. It is the privilege and the task of the Christopher to restore that concept, since he knows there is as little chance of most of the beneficial effects of social service work continuing without it as there is of keeping a house warm after the fire has died out in the furnace. For a time the house still feels warm, but this is because of the leftover heat that was generated while the fire was burning. When that lingering warmth vanishes and the furnace is cold, then suffering is bound to follow until the source of the heat is once again rekindled. In the same way, social service work will defeat the very purpose it aims to achieve, as it rejects more and more the only source which has ever had complete and practical compassion on the multitude. It is nothing short of tragic to continue to allow the management and staffing of the social service field to slip into the hands of those enemies of Christ, who would use it as a stepping stone to the enslavement of the very ones they temporarily help. There is an extraordinary opportunity for the Christopher to recapture and restore the divine inspiration which is the very foundation of social work. He should lead the way as a champion of the one great essential for social work, that God in heaven is solicitous about even the least of his children. And of course, we know both those things are metaphors, but if a God's omnipresent, he's within and without everything, without having to be everything, right? One of the most powerful reminders for the Christopher of this earnest concern of God for man's welfare in this life is contained in the unusual answer Christ gave to the messengers of John the Baptist who were sent to find out whether or not he was the true Messiah. "Go and relate to John what you have heard and seen," Christ declared, almost abruptly. "The blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead rise again, the poor have the gospel preached to them." Matthew 11:4 and 5. As you will notice, only the last point of the six mentioned in Christ's statement dealt with the strictly spiritual. The poor have the gospel preached to them, but even in that there was a reproach to those who should know better than to neglect to pass on to the poor of the world the truth intended for all men. Well, doesn't it say in the Bible that Jesus was speaking to the lost sheep of Israel, but another comforter will come that will share it with all? So and he talked about things being taken from the Israelites and given to the Ishmaelites, and so, that's sort of where the seal of the prophets and the international message, get to. But even when there were local or national or whatever prophets, Emmanuel's, Messiah's, Christ's, that there were universal truths, and as well as the particular message to those people. The other 5 points Christ mentioned concern the physical sufferings of mankind. What a strange yet wonderful proof to give of his divinity. He could have given 100 other testimonies instead of choosing this one. He didn't refer to himself directly. He spoke only of the effects on others of the flow of God's love in heaven through him to afflicted man on earth. Oh, that'd be interesting to find the Bible quote of what they're talking about exactly. If God is so solicitous for humanity in their afflictions, what a stimulating inspiration it should be for anyone and everyone in the social service field to strive to be Christ bearers from God to troubled mankind, to be the human instruments through which the divine compassion is channeled to their fellow men who need and want it so much. Now, that's the difference between Luciferianism. Is Luciferianism, you don't have to channel things in order to find and bring out the truth, as a light bearer. Lucifer means a light bearer. And, the Bible uses it 3 times for Jesus, by the way. But the rare privilege, the zealous social worker with a Christopher purpose, who has the opportunity of seeing how the other half of the world lives, has the rare privilege of sincerely trying to help those in need while still seeing that human dignity is not sacrificed in the bargain. As that great humanitarian Jacob Riis so well puts it, the social worker sees destitution and disgrace, depravity and degeneracy. Degeneracy. But also he sees courage exhibited by those of the underprivileged group in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. He sees faith, hope, and charity expressed in the daily lives of those in whom economic, educational, cultural, and social background is woefully lacking. He has the privilege of seeing personalities cramped and hidden by barriers that sometimes are not of their own making, trying to reassert themselves. His may be the privilege of helping that personality to a better understanding of its own possibilities and to the attainment of its summum bonum, highest good. The social worker is not content to sit in his house by the side of the road while the rest of men go by, but rather he is in the midst of the maelstrom of life, trying to understand the viewpoint and the troubles of others so that he can better help himself and his fellow men to a fuller life, a realization of the Master's formula to have life and to have it more abundantly. The social worker who is fired by the Christopher purpose, who is concerned with man's welfare, here as well as hereafter, can help bring to suffering humanity, the world over, a little of that peace and comfort which the Creator of all meant to be the lot of all mankind. Now, that's sort of the thing that we see, right? Is that there's more than enough. It just depends on how we treat each other and how things are distributed.